name is Josephine Sarafa. I was born in the United States in 1938. I was the first born in my family. And when I was growing up, I only spoke Chaldean. And I didn't know that there were different languages in the world. I thought the language I spoke was what everybody spoke. But then when I started first grade, I wasn't understanding anything that the teacher was talking about. And so all I did was look at what the other kids were doing. And if they stood up, I stood up. If they sat down, I sat down. If they ran around in a circle, I ran around in a circle. So I just did whatever they were doing. And one day we had been outside for lunch period. And when we came in, it was very hot, and it was a very warm day. And I wanted some water. And I didn't know how to say water. I said it in Chaldean, the only language that I knew. And I said, Maya. And they said, Mommy? And I said, no. I had heard the word mommy, so, and then they said, you want your mother? You want your mom? And I said, no. I just shook my head. And then I got so exasperated that I just ran to the door in the classroom. And the teacher thought I was trying to get out of the school. And so outside the door, there was a water fountain. So I started to go to the water fountain, and she thought I was trying to get out of the school. So she grabbed me, and and I just was ready to take a drink of water that I was so thirsty for. And the teacher thought, I was trying to just run out of the school, so she grabbed me and tried to drag me back, and I was kicking and yelling and screaming, and I kept saying, oh, no, but they didn't know why, and so that whole afternoon I was just so desperate because I was just so thirsty, and I couldn't wait to get home. When I got home, I needed water, and I told my mom, they wouldn't even let me have water. Maya, all I said, even well, Maya, wala ko siya siya Maya. And that was so traumatic for me. But little by little, I started understanding a few words here and there, and I just did whatever the other children did. I realized that I wasn't understanding what they were saying, so actually, I stopped going to school, the kindergarten, because I wasn't understanding what they were doing. And then at the end of the school year, I was happy that, I could be home. And then the next year, was first grade. And of course, the public school was close to my home. It was only like a block away. And so then when I started back to school, I was trying to learn what they were doing. I would just watch what the children were doing. And that was how I got through, that year. And the next year, I went to Catholic school because we heard that there was a Catholic school, that it was about 17 blocks away from our home. So my father would drive us in the morning. We were 3 sisters. And I was the oldest, and I had a younger sister just a year younger than me, and another one who was 6 years younger, but at that time she couldn't go to school yet. But my other sister, when we started in the Catholic school, my sister Vicky went into the first grade, and I was in the second grade. And I would watch the nun, write things on the board. And then I would just try to copy what she was writing or printing. And at that time, we used to have the kind of ink bottles where you had that little hole in the desk, and the ink bottle was in there, and then you'd have that pencil type of, with the nib that it had at the, and then, if they dipped it into the ink, I would do the same thing. So I just did whatever they did. And even though I wasn't understanding everything, I was picking up some words in the language. I'm fairly fluent in Chaldean. I mean, I can't read it or write it, but I can speak Chaldean. You want to hear me talking in Chaldean? Babi Thele Kabaya, okay, Thele 1910 to America. And he didn't, he knew some English. He had studied in school. He had gone to 10th grade there, at that time. And gur, I mean, mnonik iswala kasha, malpila, nasa iswala baserat. Okay, so, and I'm saying that, you know, the boys were taught by the priests and the girls were taught by nuns. And they had their education there. And but most of them, the people were farmers. You know, they lived in the village and they grew their own crops. You know, it's wala shamsiya, batikha, and they grew whatever crops that they needed, you know, for their livelihood. You know, o swala kashatamo with wala maseratamo. So, you know, they got their education, you know, even though it was very basic, you know, but that's, you know, many of them were learned. Kutselan Nishwasi, you know, Zwina Mahal, Gawad 3rd Street and Peterborough, around that area, which was equivalent to like where Masonic Temple is on Woodward, but this was on 3rd Street, okay? And they opened a small grocery store. And my father came with his nephew, who was the same age as he was, you know, and so they came together, and they were more like brothers. They grew up like brothers. And so my father usually took the evening shift, and his nephew took the morning shift. They preferred that. And so that's the way that they did it. And they would work like from Minchethad Tisham Khushka, Wilchethad Istar Blele. So, and they did well, and others were doing the same thing. Their friends, you know, that came. Usually, one person didn't come from, you know, to America just by himself. Usually, a group of them would come together, and so they had friends right from the beginning. Then Bishop Gowd Shulid grocery for about 5 years or so, and then they decided they were going to go back to the old country. They didn't know if they were going to stay there or just get married and come back. And when they got there, they decided they were going to get married. They had saved their money, you know, to build a, you know, a little bit of a account. And then they went back, and they thought, well, maybe they'll stay back there, you know. But they found that there wasn't any work really to do except farming, you know. And so after they had been in America, they didn't want to just do farming. You know, they thought, well, we would make more money if we come back to America. So Guerra Tamo, usually the families pick the spouses, you know, the brides, you know, for the young men. And so they, my father, you know, was told by his uncle, you know, as brata kasyamen hosh Ayla, you know, and you should consider marrying her, and the nephew also the same thing. So they got married, and then the men came back first because they said, well, we're going to go back and find, you know, a place to live, and then we'll send for you, you know, for their brides in the near future. So after about a year or so, they sent for their brides. And usually, you know, like 3 or 4 or 5 or 6 brides would come together because the men had come ahead of time, and they had kind of prepared homes for them, or, you know, places to stay. In the beginning, they stayed in flats near the downtown area. They were on the businesses were mostly on 2nd and 3rd Avenue, and not too far from where the Masonic Temple is at Woodward, but the stores were mostly on 2nd Avenue and 3rd Street, you know, so those areas had mostly flats at that time. And so there were like 2 or 3 families that would live in those flats, you know, one upstairs and one downstairs, or one, you know, next door to the other. And so that they had like a little group that they were with all the time. And so the brides, when they came, they had some friends there with them, because the other brides came, just about the same way as, they had come. And so they could talk to each other in the native language and, take care of their husbands and their little flats that they lived in. And so everybody had that kind of same situation. But as time went on, they moved to better homes, and they found very nice areas, and they went to, like in the area of where the Fisher Building is, and on 3rd Street and 2nd Street, and they bought homes there. And then they discovered that there was a Catholic church called Blessed Sacrament, and it had a school. So as soon as we were old enough to go to school, we went to Blessed Sacrament because they wanted us to get our Catholic education. And so the nuns there, they were speaking English, and we didn't know English that well. And the nuns were teaching us, the alphabet and how to write, print the alphabet, and then later write, cursive writing. It was just a few families at first, like 10 families, and then 20 families, and 30 families, so they kept coming. Immigration was a lot looser at that time than it is, currently. At first, a man would come by himself, and once he's established a business for himself, then he would send for his family, and when immigration laws changed where they could send for the whole family and the whole family could come together, that was an even better situation. And so families started coming as a whole together, not like the husband coming first, as originally happened. And so it was much easier for the families that way, and it was easier for the man and everything, and for the whole family to be together. And sometimes they would come and stay with their relatives. Later on, like this was just before the Depression. My father came in 1929, and so he came with a group of his friends, and they started their little businesses, and then they went back, got married, and brought their brides back, and then as they started to accumulate a little more money, from their business, they bought homes. And usually it was the area that was called Zone 2 of Detroit, which was like between, not quite downtown, all the way to almost Highland Park, so. And in that area was a Catholic school called Blessed Sacrament. There was a Catholic church there. So from Highland Park to where the Fisher Building is, that was called like Zone 2 of Detroit. Okay, and so most of the newcomers, settled in that area. They started buying, either flats at first and then a home, and just, depending on how much money that they were earning and everything. And they would bring the groceries home. The women didn't have to go grocery shopping because the husbands had stores, and they could bring everything they needed, from the store. And when I was about 12 years old, my girlfriend, her father had a store that was closer to like Henry Ford Hospital. And her father started taking her to work, with him. And we were like in 2nd or 3rd grade, at that time, in 4th grade. And when my father heard that her father Mary Jane, her name was Mary Jane, and when he heard that Mary Jane was going to work with her father, he said to me, "I want you to come and work at our store too." And of course, most families, if they had boys, they took the boys. But in our family, we were just girls at first, So we were 3 girls before any boys. It was 15 years later the boys came. But at the beginning, we were just the girls. So my father started taking me to the store. And at first, you liked it because you were learning how to work the cash register and were dealing with customers. And, our fathers would be watching, to make sure that nobody was taking advantage of, the situation and cheating us or anything like that. And then we learned everything about the store. You know, we learned how to put up stock. We learned how to run the cash register, how to give out change. And we learned how to even, if we had to be careful, we were slicing lunch meat or something because those machines are very dangerous, you know, the slicers. So there was like a metal piece that you'd have to put between where the blade is and where the meat was, you know. So but you learned how to take care of everything, how to put up stock, how to give change out to the customers. And we were just kids, you know, we were like 12, 13, 14, 15 years old. But it was fun, but at the same time, it took away from your playtime too. And our mothers, you know, they were taking care of the families, and they were learning how to go shopping, you know, and to buy clothes for us. And most of the time we didn't have to go with them unless we were buying shoes, you know, because you had to always try on shoes, you know. But the parents learned what the sizes of the kids were and what sizes, you know, they needed to buy for them and everything. So it was a learning process for everybody. And the community, they all stuck together, you know, because everybody helped each other. And if a cousin came, you would kind of loan them money to get them started in a business for themselves, and then they would pay back the loan. You know, you gave loans to people that you trusted, you know, and you were sure that they would pay you back. And so that's how each person, every family had their own little grocery store. I finished high school, and I was a really good student, so I decided I wanted to go to college. And my father said, "You're a girl. What do you need a college education for? You're just going to get married and raise a family." I said, "Dad, you always told me that the best thing you can do is get a good education, and now you're telling me I shouldn't go to college?" And he said, "But you're a girl." And I said, "But you can see that I get good grades and everything, you know." And I said, "But you said that you know, education was everything, so I want you to stick to your word." So he finally let me go. I was the first Chaldean girl to go to college here in the United States. And when one of my best girlfriends, when she saw that my father gave me permission to go, she told her dad, and her dad said, "I'm not going to let you go to college." And she said, "Well, Yelda just let his daughter go." And he said, "I'm going to check on that. If he really let her go, then I'll let you go." So she came to college. We went, and I said, "We're not going to go just to a regular college. We're going to go to a Catholic college, you know, run by the Jesuits." And we had moved to 7 Mile Road by that time, and U of D was on 6 Mile Road, so it was only a mile away, you know, and then another mile, you know, going further west. So we were 2 miles away from the school. And my dad said, "Well, how are you going to go? I'm going to be gone to work, and your mother doesn't know how to drive." And and I said, "I'll take the bus." So I had to take the 7 Mile bus and also the Livernois bus to get to U of D college. And I loved college. You know, it was a lot of fun, and it was I was learning a lot, and I trusted the teachers because they were the Jesuits, you know. And to me, going to a Catholic school and Catholic college was everything. And I would never consider going to Wayne. A lot of families eventually started sending their kids to Wayne University. You know, it didn't cost as much as a Catholic school. And so a lot of Chaldeans did go to Wayne. But many of us also went to U of D. And I loved the Jesuits. I loved being at college. And it was just, you know, and it wasn't that far. It was only like a mile on 7 Mile to Livernois, and then Livernois from 7 Mile to 6 miles. It was only 2 miles away, you know, so my parents thought, you know, that was fine, okay, we'll let you go. I mean, but that was a gift from God, you know, to be able to go to college. I had a double major. You know, I studied psychology because I found it interesting, and I also took up, you know, education to teach. And because sometimes you take a psychology and it's hard to get a job in that, or if you might be interested in that. But I thought they would go well together if I became a teacher, because you also understood the psychology of the mind of kids and adults and everything, and they would go well together. They'd work well together. I became a teacher, and I thought the first year I'm going to teach in a Catholic school, because I had always gone to Catholic schools and I wanted to give back to God. So I taught at Jesu Elementary and in Detroit, and it was right across the street from University of Detroit, so I was used to going there by bus, and I continued doing that because our fathers would not give a car to a girl, or they would not buy a car for us. The boys got the cars, but we didn't, so the boys got the bicycles and we didn't. So all we ever got were roller skates. I was 22. My husband, I knew my parents would not let us marry Americans, okay? That was a no-no. So I suggested that we start a youth club. And I said, let's start our own youth club, because our parents are never going to let us go anywhere, but as teenagers, we all wanted to get together. So we used to meet in each other's homes. We'd have like little parties at each other's homes, and our mothers would make food for us, and we'd have the phonograph records playing, and we would dance and joke around and have a lot of fun with each other. So one week we might go to my house, and next week over at my friend's house or my cousin's house. So the boys and the girls, and our parents were happy about that, because they really wanted us to meet, to get to know the Chaldean boys, and they wanted the boys to meet the Chaldean girls. And I said, well, why don't we start a youth club? And they said, well, where else can we meet? Well, the first church that we had was on Woodward Avenue. No, I'm sorry, on 2nd Avenue. And the church had a basement. Okay, it was a Protestant church at first, and then they wanted to sell the building, so the Chaldeans bought it, and that was the first Chaldean church that we had, and it was on Euclid and Hamilton. It was only a couple blocks from my house, and so we would go there, and have dances. We'd play records, and then sometimes we would be at each other's homes. Our mothers and fathers, because they wanted us to marry within the community, they were happy to, host the party at our homes. And so the mothers would make food, and we'd play the records, and we'd get to know each other. I wanted to marry somebody that was born here like myself. I didn't want somebody from the old country. But when my husband came to America, my father said, and he asked me out, I really at first didn't want to go out with somebody from the old country, because I was born here, and I wanted somebody Americanized like myself. And my father said, well, he comes from a very well-educated family. His father used to be my teacher in the old country. And I said, all right, I'll give him a chance. So I went out with him, and I thought, he's not that old-fashioned as I thought. So it worked out for us, and we got married, and we rented a house in Oak Park, which are just small little homes, really. They're not real huge, but it was a good beginning. And then I got pregnant and had my first child, a girl. Eventually I had 6 children, and I had a set of twins in there. With 6 kids, you can't really work too much. But then when they were all in school, I said, I want to go back to teaching, because the first year I had taught at Jesu Elementary, and it was a Catholic school. But this time with 6 kids, I thought I better try the public schools because they pay more. And so I just worked for Birmingham schools. Birmingham at that time, I mean, all the school districts were noticing that there were a lot of immigrants from that were Chaldean, and many of them didn't know how to speak English. The kids didn't know how to speak English. The mothers didn't know how to speak English. You know, the men knew a little bit because they were working in the stores and they were meeting the public. You know, and so so that we started that way. When I graduated, it was 1960. The thesis I wrote in 1975, and I did teach, you know, for a year, and then I had my children. And then we were hearing that the schools were having trouble with the Chaldean kids because they didn't know how to reach them. They didn't know how to reach the parents. And especially the boys were, you know, sometimes acting up in school and everything. And I thought, well, you know, I need to write something for the schools that so that they know what the Chaldeans are all about, why they came here, what kind of family life they have, what kind of ideas they have about, you know, life and everything, and jobs and everything like that. So I wrote my thesis about it, and every school district wanted a copy, you know. So I wrote it in English, and I had someone that was good in Arabic. So I wrote the English portion, and I had this other person translate it into Arabic, so that even the Chaldean parents could read it and know what was going on. And I was starting to give presentations to different school districts because when they heard that I knew English fluently since I was born here, and I knew Chaldean fairly, you know, fluently, and they wanted to have somebody that could, you know, teach the schools how to handle the kids and what to do when, you know, the boys were acting up. The girls were not a problem, you know, they were more docile, you know, and they followed orders and everything, but the boys were aggressive, you know, and they weren't always turning in their schoolwork. And so I wrote about the Chaldeans, how the family has to help each other. When they first come to America, they're desperate to make a living here. And so they make the boys go to work with them. So the boys after school always had to go work in the stores with their fathers. And so they didn't always get their homework done. And so that explained to the teachers, you know, why the boys weren't doing their homework. It wasn't just willful from them. It was the fact that they had limited time because they had to help support the family. And so teachers finally understood, you know, and so they tried to accommodate the boys, as, you know, a little bit more, and not to take it out on them, you know, that, you know, why aren't you doing your homework and everything, or think that they're lying or something like that. So it was very helpful for the teachers to see this and to understand, and it worked out, you know. I mean, they became more sympathetic towards them. Eventually, they said, well, you know, we need to have a social center that everybody could come to, and that was the idea of, you know, starting the cultural center here. So it started out as a meeting place, you know, for the people and for the families to come to, and that's how they came up with the idea. Well, you know, the Jewish community always had a Jewish center, and other nationalities had their own centers, and so everybody said, well, why don't we start a center, you know, for the Chaldeans? So they had to get loans from the bank, and everybody kind of pitched in a little bit, and you know, we had some good leaders, you know, that were willing to go through all that trouble to make a center for everyone. Just to get together, have a place where the men could meet and the whole family could meet, and, you know, and then they would cook our native food, you know, our dolma and our kabi and, you know, bulgur and whatever else, you know. So that's how it started, because they saw that other communities were doing that. You know, the Italians had a place, you know, the Hispanics had a place, you know, so why not the Chaldeans? You know, they were all successful businessmen, so why not do it? And they did. It was great, you know, because we wanted to get together. the young people wanted to get together, and our parents wanted us to get together. So it was a good way for us all to meet each other and to have dances occasionally, and parties. And our families always wanted to have a place like when they had a funeral to go to have dinners there, and to commemorate the passing of a certain person and things like that. So that's how it started. We had a company from New York that came, and they asked us what we wanted, and so a whole group of us, pitched in ideas, what we wanted to see in the museum, and to tell the history of our people, going all the way back to ancient Iraq and ancient life, and how the people, stuck together and kept their religion against all the Muslims and everything else. So the history we tried to portray, through the years. And we had this company from New York that helped us with that. And they made some suggestions for us, and we agreed to this idea and maybe not this other idea. So there were a group of us that were doing that, men and women together. Well, we were very proud of it. We were very proud of it because it was beautiful, and everybody liked it, and they were actually surprised at how nice it was.
I always was lectured, as were all of my siblings, about how important it is to be part of the community, to give back. And it didn't surprise me at all when she really grabbed the reins of helping to get this off the ground, and with the other founders, really made it happen. A lot of blood, sweat, and tears went into it, and things behind the scenes.
It is a treasure. It really is, and it's something that our children should cherish and be proud of and pass it on to future generations.
The Cultural Center is really going to become even more of a touchstone for the community. As we grow and expand, it's like the surface area of a sphere. We're going to be growing and growing, and some of the younger generations have a different experience of what it means to be a Chaldean than it did when they were smaller families and everybody knew every single family. And some people don't even recognize my last name now because the Chaldean community has grown so well. And I think that even for my own children, it was a really wonderful, eye-opening journey to see chronologically what it was like, to see that historical timeline, to see how we've assimilated through some of the more difficult growth periods. And it's only going to become more important as we go forward. And it's utterly essential that we do not lose our identity as Chaldeans. We retain the traditions and the language and the parties and the celebrations and the food. But it's more than that. It's our faith. It's identity as Chaldean Rite of the Roman Catholic Church. It's about bringing the community together and staying unified. And if we do that, we can't lose.
This is a good start, for them. Just continue it. Keep it up to date, and keep it looking good. That's all you need.